Okay, Kevin, we're good to go. I'm going to mute myself. Take us away.
All right, thank you, Dan. Okay, welcome all. Welcome to what's going to be a new lunch and learn session, if you like, of about 30 minutes duration. And we're going to deliver this in a series of 7 weekly sessions. The reason why I picked up a book, this particular book, about 20 years ago or so, it might even be longer, which had a profound effect on me and taught me so much about developing self and along with how to win friends and influence people. I picked up again recently to read a chapter about the win-win outcomes for a different event, which is running tomorrow. And from there, I just rediscovered this incredible book. And then had the idea to share it. So the book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I'm going to share 1 habit each week for 7 weeks. I'm going to break the chapter into its key points in order. And we're going to follow along with the slides. And at the end, there will be 3 learning and discovery questions for you. And we can have some shares and questions at the end. So in this moment, now, can you try to stand apart from yourself? Try to project your consciousness upward, look up into the corner of your room and see yourself in your mind's eye. Can you look at yourself almost as though you were someone else? Now think about the mood that you are now in. Can you identify it? What are you feeling? How would you describe your current mental state? Now think for a minute about how your mind is working. Is it quick and alert? Do you sense that you are torn between doing this mental exercise and the point of doing it? What you've just done is uniquely human. Animals do not possess this ability. We call it self-awareness, or the ability to think about your very thought process. We are not our feelings, we are not our moods, we are not even our thoughts. Self-awareness enables us to stand apart and examine even the way that we see ourselves. I believe that the people that are not exposed to the self-development type of education that we all are, and have been, are therefore limited in their response to whatever is happening around them. In the case of Pavlov's dog, you all know that the dog responds to a stimulus, in this case a bell. Humans too respond to the stimulus and can therefore react in a way that is a type of programming. The programming can be social, upbringing, genetic. It's as though a trigger goes off, and in some cases words or actions may happen before you even know that they're happening. In this extreme example, many of us who have experienced this, we would call it a red mist. A recent example, we have seen that people are triggered by the media from a social point of view. And for what's happened just recently is, and here comes a pandemic, here comes a recession. And what ensues is like a panic response. The result we saw was a clearing of the shelves in their supermarkets. Now, Covey shares a very powerful story in this particular chapter about being proactive, about a man called Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist and a Jew. He was imprisoned in the death camps of Nazi Germany, where he experienced things that were so repugnant to our sense of decency that we shudder to even repeat them. His parents, his brother and his wife died in the camps, or were sent to the gas ovens. Except for his sister, his entire family perished. Frankl himself suffered torture and innumerable indignities, never knowing from one moment to the next if his path would lead to the ovens or if he would be among the saved, who would remove the bodies or shovel out the ashes of those so fated. One day, naked and alone in a small room, he began to become aware of what he later called the last of the human freedoms. The freedom his Nazi captors could not take away. They could control his entire environment, they could do what they wanted to his body, but Viktor Frankl himself was a self-aware being who could look as an observer at his very involvement. His basic identity was intact. He could decide within himself how all of this was going to affect him, between what happened to him or the stimulus and his response to it. Was his freedom or power to choose that response? In the midst of his experiences, Frankl would project himself into different circumstances, such as lecturing to his students after his release from the death camps. He would describe himself in the classroom, in his mind's eye, and give his students the lessons he was learning during his very torture. Through a series of such disciplines, mental, emotional, and moral, principally using memory and imagination, he exercised his small embryonic freedom until it grew larger and larger, until he had more freedom than his Nazi captors. They had more liberty, more options to choose from in their environment, but he had more freedom, more internal power to exercise his options. He became an inspiration to those around him, even to some of the guards. He helped others find meaning in their suffering and dignity in their prison existence. So this story shows that Viktor Frankl was able to choose his thoughts and how he responded. He was able to create freedom for himself. So what is proactivity? It means that, so from being proactive, Stephen Covey talks about proactivity and defines it as, it means that as human beings, we're responsible for our own lives. Our behavior is a function of our decisions, not our conditions. We have initiative and responsibility to make things happen. Responsibility, he says, response-ability, the ability to choose our response. Highly proactive people recognize that responsibility. They do not blame circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for their behavior. Their behavior is a product of their own conscious choice. I've shared with many of you before that I'm deeply concerned about what the impact this is having, our current environment with lockdown and the pandemic, etc., is going to have on our family, friends, colleagues, and neighbours through lockdown. People in many cases will be responding to the stimulus of staying indoors, of less contact with others, of not being able to use resources that would normally help them, and the results will be more cases of mental health, higher cases of domestic abuse. When the area, like the home that one lives in, is confined, and there are trigger points with partners, children, fear, or actual lack of money. Our current situation is likely to make many people not behave proactively, and not all the time when they might have done so before. It's a very, very testing time for us. So it is time to focus on this subject to help ourselves and to help others. The language that we use is a very real indicator of whether we are reactive or proactive people. The language of reactive people absolves them of responsibility. So for example, when someone says, "That's me, that's just the way I am," there's nothing, that means there's nothing I can do about it. If they say, "He makes me so mad," that means I'm not responsible. My emotional life is governed by something outside of my control. If someone says, "I can't do that, I just don't have the time," that means it's something outside of me. Limited time is controlling me. If someone says, "If only my spouse were more patient," someone else's behavior is limiting my effectiveness, is what that means. If someone says, "I have to do it," that means circumstances or other people are forcing me to do what I do. I'm not free to choose my own actions. There's a great personal story, well, many personal stories, but there's a particular one in this book, in this particular chapter, where Covey was teaching a seminar about proactivity. And a man approached to say, "This all sounds great, but every situation is different." He explained that there were problems between him and his wife, and the feeling of love wasn't there anymore. So Covey just confirmed, "The feeling isn't there anymore?" "That's right," the man said. and we have 3 children we're really concerned about. What do you suggest? Covey replied, love her. The man said, but I told you the feeling isn't there anymore. Covey replied, love her. The man said, you don't understand. The feeling of love just isn't there. Covey said, then love her. If the feeling isn't there, that's a good reason to love her. But how do you love when you don't love? The man said, my friend, love is a verb, love. The feeling is a fruit of love, the verb. So love her, serve her, sacrifice, listen to her, empathize, appreciate, affirm her. And he asked him, are you willing to do that? So the circle of concern. Another excellent way to become more self-aware regarding our proactivity is to look where we focus our time and energy. We each have a wide range of concerns: our children, our health, our wealth, problems at work, the national debt, nuclear war. We can separate those things that we have no mental or emotional involvement by creating a circle of concern. As we look at the things that we put in the circle of concern, we realize that some of those we have no real control over and can do nothing about, and some that we can do something about. So I'd just like you to just take a moment, 30 seconds, and just do your own circle. Think of some things that would be inside your circle of concern. And then you could probably think of some random things that would be outside of your circle of concern. So, as we look at the things that we put in the circle of concern, we realize that some of those we have no real control over and can do nothing about, and some that we can do something about. So if we create another circle within the circle, we call this the circle of influence. Proactive people focus their efforts in the circle of influence. They work on the things they can do something about. Their energy is positive, enlarging and magnifying their circle increases. Reactive people focus their efforts in the circle of concern. They focus on the weaknesses of others, the problems in the environment, and circumstances of which they have no control. My experience of working with entrepreneurs, all of you guys, is that in nearly all cases, you focus on a circle of influence. And we have, as a group, seen some great examples of where some masterminders, have had success in pivoting their business during this time to serve their clients and win financial reward. At the moment, we can't go out as much. We can't exercise or see friends or family. All social desires our social desires are shut down. This is what reactive people will be focusing on right now. What they are concerned about, but can do nothing about, and consequently their circle of influence diminishes. This personal story I'm about to share with you came up in a recent conversation. So it was actually quite a few years ago. Some of you will know that I worked at Churchill Insurance, and some of you know the story, but I had to set myself a five-year plan. So I went traveling, came back to Churchill, was working on a very basic, on the phone, selling car insurance, and my 5-year goal was to become a training manager. So I shared this with my managers, etc., and they helped and supported me along this journey. And after about after about 4 years, maybe, I had an opportunity, a secondment. I worked in Bromley in Kent at the headquarters of Churchill, but I had a secondment up to Ipswich, where Church Insurance had bought an insurance broker for motorbike and motorbike insurance. And they said I could go out there for 12 weeks and I take a secondment for the training manager role. And the training manager, the current incumbent, will be coming back after that time. So I thought to myself, well, I've been at Churchill all this time. I understand Churchill, but I don't understand this other insurance company called Devitt in Ipswich, and the headquarters of which were in Romford in Essex. So I kind of set myself a plan. And I set myself a plan thinking, well, how could I possibly go to a brand new insurance company of which the type of insurance they do, I don't fully understand. I don't understand the dynamics or the people. Haven't been to the place before. How could I possibly go there and deliver training that was going to add value to the business, be influential? So in my mind's eye, whilst at home in Kent, I was thinking about this before I went, and I decided that I was, of the 12 weeks I was going to be there, that I was going to spend 9 weeks of that time learning about the business and 3 weeks of training. And I remember saying to myself, but Kevin, aren't you taking a massive risk? Is that too short or too long? Could it be that I haven't got enough time left to deliver the training that's going to get me the result I want, which for me is the result is they get the training, but I also get promotion. So I spent 9 weeks deciding that I was going to visit all the departments, speak to all the people. I was going to find out what was going on, learn about what was happening. I went to people's desks, different managers from different departments. They were a bit surprised and freaked out, like, what are you doing here? And I just started to build that relationship. And then I asked them to go out for lunch so we could discuss it at lunch about what was going on for their business. And over a period of time, they got to know me better. I kind of won their, in a relationship, I won their trust. And then I delivered the training in the last 3 weeks. At the end of that period, we had a board meeting. And at the board meeting, where all the heads of department were sitting and the managing director, they said to me that they were really thrilled. So we're very, very thrilled with what you've achieved. They said that we don't feel like we've ever had a training manager like you before. We don't feel like we've ever had anyone understand our business like you do. Because of what you've done and the way you've gone about it, we feel so confident that you've got our back and you understand us and know us, that we would like to offer you promotion, which was, for me, was a fantastic achievement. So I was really thrilled. So whilst I was worried about my strategy, it did prove to be successful. So as you can see there on the slide, what I was able to do was increase my circle of influence by understanding the business, understanding the people, and eventually got the outcome I wanted. So direct, indirect, and no control. So the problems that we face fall into one of 3 areas. Direct control is problems involving our own behavior. Indirect control is problems involving other people's behavior. And no control are problems that we can do nothing about. So direct control problems are solved by working on our own habits. And that was something I would have done in the previous story. Indirect control problems are solved by changing our methods of influence. And no control is solved by taking the responsibility to smile and accept that what we can't change and learn to live with. It's inspiring to realize that in choosing our response to circumstance, we powerfully affect our circumstance. When we change one part of the chemical formula, we change the nature of the results. So the haves and the bees. A way to determine which circle our focus is in is to distinguish between the haves and the bees. So if we're saying things like, I'll be happy when my house is paid off, or if only I had a more patient wife or husband, if only I had a more obedient kids, if I had my degree, if I could just have some time to myself, we are spending more time in the circle of concern. If we're saying things like, I can be more patient, be wise, be loving, then we're spending more time in our area of influence. It's an inside-out job. We think that what's out there is the problem, and therefore it influences us, but actually changing the inside will change the outside world. So I love this metaphor. I originally created it to teach the power of letting go of the outcome, and it's called the traffic lights. So imagine this, if you will. You're in your car and you've left a little late to make your train to get somewhere important to you on time. So you're in the car, you're a bit late, you're driving along, and every single traffic light you come to turns red. Oh my God, here we go. The next one red, the next one red. Even a situation happens where they put some roadworks in the road. Even those lights have turned red. Now you've got three red lights, you're on the way to the station, the road you're on is on a slight incline. And on a slight incline, you can see the brow of the hill and you can't see over the top. You think, oh, I've got a bit of space. I can put my foot down and make up some time. And ahead of you on the left, out turns a car in front of you, an old deer doing about 20 miles an hour. And you can't overtake her because the brow of the hill's coming, so you can't go past. So, oh my God. And you just think to yourself, everything's going against me. I'm going to miss the train. I'm going to miss my meeting. I've ruined it. And you notice in that moment, your state, a bit like what I asked you to do at the start of this training session. What state are you in the car at that time as you're feeling stressed that everything's going against you? I bet that your hands are gripping the wheel tightly. I bet you can see the whites of your knuckles. I bet that your breathing is shallow and in your throat. And I bet that your back is perspiring. And I bet that you're leaning forward in the chair. So in this metaphor, the first things that we change is our state. So we'd move the breathing from our throat down into our stomach. So we breathe slower and deeper. We relax the grip on the wheel and we sit back in the chair. Now in this moment, what we're trying to do is, once we've changed our physical side, now we're going to go inside our mind and go, okay, what I'm looking for here is to find a place where, what's the word I was looking for? Where you let go of the outcome is the phrase. And then letting go of the outcome, what does that mean? How do you let go of the outcome? Well, inside you have to find a place that's equally happy to make the train as you are to miss the train. You find that balance inside of yourself. Now, you know your outcome. You want to make the train, but you let go of the outcome and you find that place where you're happy between the balance. You're equally happy to make it, equally happy not to make it. As you've released your body, as you've gone inside and you've had those thoughts, then all of a sudden, you look up and the old deer in front of you doing 20 miles an hour takes the next turning left. She moves out of the road, out of your way. You continue along your way. You come to the next traffic light. It turns green, straight through. You come to a roundabout that's a bit like, it's packed with cars, but it's like a Moses parting of the seas, as your car just finds a way right through this crazy roundabout and on your way. You arrive at the train station and you think, yeah, I probably missed the train. I've got here just as the train was due. You park the car, you get on the platform and you look at the signage and find out the train's running 5 minutes late. You walk on the platform, the doors open, you get on, the doors close, you're on your way. You're going to make your meeting. So quite often, it's like I said, it's an inside-out job, but this is what's coming out from this book, is we can change the inside. It has a big impact on the outside. The final point to make in this session is what Covey calls the other end of the stick. Before totally shifting all of our focus to the circle of influence, there is something to consider in our circle of concern: consequences and mistakes. So we are not in control of the consequences to the choice of dealing with a problem. Going back to my promotion story, I decided to approach the opportunity a certain way to increase my influence in the hope that I would gain a promotion, but it was far from certain. And there was another consequence. In getting that promotion, I then meant I had to then start working out of Romford, Essex, even though I lived in Bromley in Kent. It meant I would no longer be working for Churchill in the headquarters in Bromley, and I even wouldn't be going to Ipswich anymore. So there were certain consequences to that success. Mistakes. So constantly on mistakes. Mistakes, in essence, he explains, are there to be learned from. The proactive approach to a mistake is acknowledge it instantly, correct, and learn from it. This literally turns failure into a success. Success, said IBM founder TJ Watson, is on the far side of failure. Not to acknowledge a mistake, not to correct it and learn from it, is a mistake of a different order. It usually puts a person on a self-deceiving, self-justifying path, often involving rational lies to self and to others. Spiritually speaking, if we are a spiritual being having a human experience, which Wayne Dwyer describes, then we are here to learn our lessons. And when we don't, Tony Robbins describes, then we experience the feather, the brick, and then the truck. So, before we take any questions or have any shares, these are the learnings from the chapter about being proactive. So if you could give this some thought for now. So for a full day, listen to your language and the language of the people around you. How often do you hear reactive phrases like, if only I can't? Identify an experience that you might have in the near future. Based on experience, you would probably behave reactively. Review the situation in your circle of influence. How could you respond proactively? Take everyone, create the experience vividly in your mind, picturing yourself responding in a proactive manner. Remind yourself of the gap between stimulus and response, commitment to yourself to exercise your freedom of choice. And finally, select a problem from your work or your personal life that's frustrating to you, whether it is direct, indirect, or no control problem. Identify the first step, take in your circle of influence to solve it, and then take that step. So just a couple of thoughts now, while you may make some notes on a page and then think about what, start playing this out in your mind. And then when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be happy if you'd like to unmute yourself, if you'd like to share experiences, thoughts, or have any questions at all.
Thanks, Kevin. So guys, yeah, just unmute yourself. If you're not sure how to do that, I am here in the background, so you can post it in the chat. And if Kevin's not sure how to pick it up on the chat, I will relay it to Kevin. So you can just unmute yourself, or just put it in the chat, whichever you prefer. Kevin, just to kick him off while they're thinking of questions, could you just reiterate? It was just a good reminder about feather brick truck that you've read to how. I think it's Tony Robbins that interprets it.
Yes.
What does that metaphor mean? Could you kind of recap? What's the analogy?
Brilliant. Yeah, certainly. So from a spiritual point of view, if we're a spiritual being and having a human experience, then we come to the planet, live out this human experience with lessons to learn. Everyone experiences. Everyone has, whether they believe in spirituality or not. Everyone's here and experiences things that are going on for them that need to learn from. And if we don't, when we haven't learned the lesson, we receive another lesson in the form of a feather. So it's not too harsh. If we ignore the learning from the lesson and repeat the mistake, the same lesson, then we receive another warning or another lesson in the form of a brick, a much firmer, more direct example. And if we still don't learn the lesson, then we get hit by the truck.
Right. So perhaps in a common analogy would be something like people that push themselves too hard all the time and never take the time out to relax. The feather might look like feeling a little bit low energy, but if they keep ignoring it and keep pushing themselves too hard and not recovering, the brick might look like, significant flu, which is somewhat topical at the moment, or being really unwell. And a truck might look like, if they continue persisting, they're innovated and they end up with cancer or some kind of serious acute medical challenge.
Yeah, I've got I know example of a friend of mine. His feather brick truck was that He wasn't opening his post. He had a credit card debt, wasn't opening the post, and was ignoring the fact that he had to pay the credit card debt back. So the feathers would have been the letters coming to the door saying you need to make the payment. The truck then would have been the fact that he never made the payment to the credit card company. The brick would have been the CCJ. That's a 6-year, I believe, 6-year penalty. If you still haven't paid the credit card bill and you have the CCJ, then it could be that the truck comes, and the truck could be bailiffs at the door taking away your items. That would be another example.
Yeah, great example. So yeah, it's kind of what you resist persists. If you ignore it, it gets steadily worse until you're forced to pay attention to it.
Yeah, and it's like the example of leaving one's head in the sand, isn't it? Leave your head in the sand, well, exposes your backside, doesn't it? And you get hit on the backside. So if you leave your head in the sand, you're not dealing with the situation, not learning the lesson, you're not moving forward.
Well, a good example in business is probably where industries change, right? So if an industry is changing and adapting, and obviously it's accelerated right now, but becoming more online and digitized, it doesn't typically happen overnight. The feather is, gradually perhaps some customers taking advantage of online versions of your product offered by your competitors. The brick takes the form of you losing market share, and the truck is the form of the business failing because you've failed to adapt the business model to the changing market conditions. Something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Good. All right. Well,
have we got any thoughts or shares or any questions from anyone?
Yeah, let's pick on people. So
examples,
Alistair, Marcus, who we still got? Alistair, Marcus, Mike, Tracy, Will, Alex, Bev.
Anyone who's consciously living in their circle of influence, who they maybe they weren't aware it was a circle of influence because it hadn't been described that way, but they're aware of doing it. Or people that you know who have the language that means that they are spending time as blamers. They're in maybe the circle of concern, and you consider that they're just not moving forward as a person. Consider the difference between you and them.
Hi. Shall I go?
Yeah, mate. Go for it, Marcus.
Yeah. Okay, right. Bit of honesty here, bit of where I am at the moment with things. And this is great timing. Thank you very much. So I have to admit, for me personally, getting to the end of last week, I've generally been in a very good place the last few weeks, considering. But I'd sort of hit a wall last Friday, and as I was going into the weekend, I was suppose looking at it now, I jumped into that circle of concern more than I thought I should, than I have been in the past. And it was, I was looking at how I could come out of it, but the more I was looking to be proactive, the more I couldn't get out of that circle for some reason. But I needed to change the environment I was in, and I needed to change the things I was absorbing, enable for me to bounce back. And I have bounced back since. So from, it's Wednesday now, forget what day it is, but Monday and Tuesday was spent absorbing information from different sources and trying to get my head back into the game, as they say, from where it was. And it was all because it was all in, it all seems very obvious, but it was everything to do with what was in my influence, in my control. If I just take my world of where I am with the business, is I see things as I've got 3 separate entities of a business as it is, where that might go. Separate entity is what might happen if it doesn't survive where we are, and how it might resurrect. And that of another entity that's a new product, as say, a new business. So there's 3 things that are jumbling around in my head, and I hadn't been able to, I'd got overwhelmed with the fact of I didn't know how to separate each of them with a plan to move forward. And I'd stepped into that circle of what I see now of concern, of jumping ahead and not realizing about just stepping back to being able to go, well, actually, what is it that is in my control? What can I influence within each of that? And having done that from Monday to today, I'm in a far more inspiring space than I was last week. I also realized that I'm human, and you do have at the moment, it is about being on a bit of a wave and up and down.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm not going to beat myself up too much about it,
No.
but it did hit me unexpectedly last week. But it's the fact now that I've realized what it is. And then now I've got the inspiration, I've been able to break down those three entities into a plan. It's what subconsciously I found is being in the flow has brought about other ideas that I hadn't even thought about last week, because they weren't even there. They weren't even about at all. I couldn't have gone looking for them because they didn't exist. It's just got me into a different train of thought. Inspiring in terms of looking at opportunities rather than the opposite end of the scale. So
what has this going through this chapter, what has it done for you today? Yeah, what has it done for you today going through this chapter? Does it allow? Yeah, I won't put any more into that question.
Yeah, no, I suppose it's that if you take a look at that, what you're saying there about the traffic light scenario, how easy it is to sort of to keep going at that pace and creating scenario that basically there is only going to be one outcome from it. But if you are able to just slow down and accept that something might not be as you want it to be, but there is an alternative, and then you're good with that, and then you can focus on that aspect of things as well, I suppose. It's the separation between, I mean, it's all seems so obvious, but it's the separation between, sorry, I've just got a little person. Thank you. I've got a cupcake winning today.
Nice.
It's the separation of what is in your control and what can you do today, and rather than that of like out external events that can easily lead you to a future state that isn't actually real, I suppose. And it's just highlighting that. And I would say these things to other people, and it's a bit of about looking at it myself and going, yep, I've just experienced that myself in the last few days. So